let's go over to some more earnings. So we had Procter and Gamble, which they do a lot of household items. They have shampoo, toothpaste, cleaners, stuff like that. They actually reported pretty good earnings. They had $1.63 a share versus $1.42 expected. Their revenue was $19.3 billion compared to $18.38 billion expected. So the revenue was up 9%. That's pretty good. They also raised their guidance from 3 to 4% for 2020, for all of 2020. The previous guidance was only 1 to 3%. So that's great news. When you have a company that's actually going and raising their guidance for the next year, that's always good. The one thing that they did say that was interesting, though, is that they said they see the conditions of the pandemic continuing through next year. So they're kind of factoring this in, that this is going to continue to be like this next year. Next up, we had a lot of news going on with collectible cards. And a lot of these big influencers on social media kind of went into the market here. You had, it was a couple of different people. You had Gary Vee, you had Graham Stephan, you had Logan Paul, you had Steve Aoki, the DJ guy, go, and he said he was going to announce a card shop. And just to give a high-level overview, I think I'd rather do a separate video on this one. But there was cards like LeBron James that went from $2,000, last year. Now they're going for $15K. And there's a lot of interest in this collectible card market, where it's sports cards, where it's Pokemon, where it's basketball cards, baseball cards. So you have to really keep an eye on this and where money is going. And it looks like this could be a situation where people made a lot of money maybe in the stock market, and they're trying to move around into more kind of hard assets. And a hard asset is like a physical item that you can actually own, rather than a paper asset, which all those profits can suddenly disappear. But if you have a hard asset, if you have a house, the house, unless it's destroyed, the house isn't normally going anywhere. It's a physical asset that you own. So people might be going into hard assets with this. Remember, the Federal Reserve balance sheets are increasing like crazy recently. So I'll do a separate thing on that. But anyway, next up we have Google sued. Google, the tech giant, is being sued by the Department of Justice and at least 10 other states for anti-competitive behavior. So this is actually huge, because we haven't had a case that was this big probably since like the Microsoft one that went on for 10 years, where they said Microsoft had a monopoly. They went to court for over a 10-year period. Before that, there was one with AT&T, and that's when you ended up having the baby bells that were broken off of AT&T because of their competitive behavior. And this is all based on the Sherman Antitrust Act. Right now, they're saying that the anti-competitive behavior is in search and search advertising business, and that Google used anti-competitive tactics to maintain dominance in general search advertising. And this says in the filing, this is the cornerstone of their empire. That's what it says about Google. So they made deals with Verizon and Apple to make Google the default search engine for the items on, like the Apple iPhone. If you search on there, the default's going to go to Google. And the thing is that mobile is now like the largest platform. Everybody's going into mobile. And if you look at the market share that Google has right now, overall 88% market share on the search market. The problem is, on the phones, on mobile, they have 92% of the search market. On tablets, they have 90% of the search market and 80% on desktops. I mean, if you think besides Google, what other companies are there that actually have their own search? I mean, you have like Yahoo Search, you have Bing. I mean, what else? You have DuckDuckGo, but I mean, some of those other sites might even use Google algorithms, and they just have their own version of it. So it's pretty crazy to see that. Google is supposedly actually paying Apple around $11 billion a year to be featured as the default search on iPhones. So that's another thing that they brought up as anti-competitive behavior, where these big tech companies come together and kind of make deals like this that really benefit them at the expense of anybody else. And if you have the default on there, most people are not going to go into their settings and change whatever the default is on their phones. So this has a chance to be huge. And it's not just Google. Remember, there was Google, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, all these companies, they ended up being like testifying before Congress recently and are being investigated for competitive behavior, anti-competitive behavior. And Google might just be the first. This might happen as well with Facebook or other companies. So we have to see how that ends up playing out. but this could drag them into a major lawsuit that can just go on for years and years, and it could make it like AT&T, where the company is never really the same afterwards. And remember, Bill Gates said actually that Microsoft spent so much time focusing on this court trials and everything that they weren't able to focus on an operating system for a mobile device. And if you guys remember the Windows Phone, which you shouldn't because nobody does because they got rid of it quickly, they basically failed on that whole endeavor because he said they were devoting so much resources to the trials instead of creating the new products. So that's going to be a big thorn in the side of Google, and we're going to have to see what happens with it. Next up, we have some major hacking announcements that occurred. So you had a new report come out that state-sponsored hackers from China are actually targeting US defense computer networks. And it was actually confirmed that the Navy in particular had ship maintenance data and missile plans stolen. So they're stealing like very top secret information from our military capacity in the United States, which is pretty crazy. On top of that, you had cases filed against 6 Russian hackers, and they were operating from the Russian government hacking unit called the GRU. So this is, again, state-sponsored hacking, and it happens not just with our Defense Department, as we saw with China there, but also our US companies. But this one in particular, these 6 individuals were charged with conspiracy, computer hacking, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. And they were the ones involved with the Ukraine power outage when that happened with the energy grid. They hacked their energy grid. They stole the president of France's emails and the hacking attempts on the US election systems. So even though the FBI and everything, they charged these 6 Russian hackers, they all live in Russia, and it's not like they're going to get extradited to the United States. So I don't think anything's going to happen with this, but they are on the government's most wanted list now. Next up, we have the Goldman Sachs story where we talked about the settlement that they were doing for this bribery case in Malaysia and other Southeast Asian countries. So if you look at it, no criminal charges are being applied to anybody at the company. They're paying $2.8 billion and admitting wrongdoing. But yet, once again, this is basically how a company acts different than an individual. If an individual did this, they'd probably be thrown in jail and that'd be the end of it. Here, they just pay a giant fine and keep going on as business as usual. There was some pay that was taken away from the executives there. They actually took back some of their compensation, including the ex-CEO that was under the company before. So they took some millions away there. But still, to be able to do all that without any criminal charges being enacted against anyone is kind of interesting that they get off that easy. Next up, we have Netflix, which announced a pretty bad quarter here. And it was interesting to see like how the pandemic drove up the subscription rates. This current quarter, though, they only added 2.2 million subscribers, and the estimates were crazy. They were like 12.5 million subscribers they were expecting Netflix to add, and they didn't add anywhere near that. Now, the previous 2 quarters, what I was saying there, they had crazy growth. They had 26 million subscribers in 2 quarters. So that's almost the same as the whole previous year in just 2 quarters. The stock fell 6% on the news and then ended the week down 9% after this kind of weak quarter with the subscriber growth. The profit, though, it did increase $790 million, or $1.74 a share, from $665 million, or 1.47 a share. So that was significant there. But the analysts had expected earnings of $2.13, and they only earned $1.74. And now looking at some of the other stuff here, the revenue, they ended up making an extra $1 billion from last year where they made $5.25 billion. Estimates for the 4th quarter now include 6 million new subscribers, which is down 31% from the initial 8.8 million that they were originally thinking they were going to get. And now the expectations were around 6.54, even with this quarter coming in, and then they lowered it again to 6 million. So that's, again, not good news there. The company did say that whole subscriber count jumping from the pandemic would kind of level off. And there was also this big controversy over the Cuties film that was on Netflix, where a lot of people said they were canceling the account because they were showing children in a kind of a sexual way that I don't know all the details on that, but a lot of people said that they were going to cancel their subscription based on them having this film on Netflix. It doesn't look like you can actually see the results of that in the numbers. It seems like they still had the the same amount of subscribers. The subscribers didn't go down. They didn't add as many new ones though. Overall, at the end of the year, they are supposed to have 200 million subscribers to the Netflix service. So that's still a ton of people. Next up, we have Microsoft making some moves kind of in the cloud space here, where there's some other big players as well. They're expanding their Azure cloud computing business by having satellites that launch up into space and can beam down data from outside of the Earth's atmosphere. That's pretty crazy. So they're actually teaming up with SpaceX, and this was the big announcement, that they were using SpaceX to launch the satellites into space. Now, SpaceX is doing their own kind of internet connectivity system called Starlink. So they're doing it already, so it makes sense for them to get this additional business. The difference is that Microsoft they have some main competitors like Amazon Web Services that do cloud computing and storing cloud information. The owner of that is Jeff Bezos, owns Amazon, and then on top of that, he owns Blue Origin. He owns the majority stake in Amazon and everything. He owns Blue Origin, and now they're going with the competitor to Blue Origin, SpaceX, to launch their satellites for Microsoft. So it's kind of interesting little jab at Jeff Bezos there. Overall, we were talking about the cards before and the market for collectible sports cards going up and Pokemon and all that stuff. You're looking at also a lot of commodity increases in price right now. So this might be something to do with assets, people moving to hard assets. You have aluminum futures on the London Metal Exchange hit 1,863.50 a ton. That is an 18-month high. Okay, that's one metal. Then you also had a 15-month high for nickel, which hit $18,555. I mean, that's the highest point for the year for nickel. $15,822. Copper, $3.20 a pound. It's a 2.5-year high, up 40% in 6 months. China is the world's largest copper producer and they are the largest consumer of copper. So you're seeing that we discussed before, because of the pandemic, they're coming out of it. They're actually having a lot of demand for copper again because they're building new homes and a lot of smartphones as well. Next up, we have GM unveiling their new electric Hummer. So originally the Hummers, people used to make fun of them because they were gas guzzlers and everything. Now they have an electric Hummer that's being released. And it looks pretty cool. It goes from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. So this competes with some of the other most competitive electric vehicles on the market. It also has independent wheels so that you can turn the back wheels and the front wheels independently. So they have this thing, the crab walk, where you can literally go on a diagonal instead of just going forward and backward, which was pretty interesting. They have air suspension where if you're going over rough terrain, you can lower and raise the air suspension as much as you need to pass over that terrain. Now, the first edition is due in the fall of next year, and it's going to be priced around $112,000. So that's a lot of money. Again, this is a high-end vehicle right here. And it's not a Hummer like we had seen in the past, where you had like basically an SUV version of the military vehicle. This one is actually a pickup truck. So it has the pickup truck back on the end of it. The cheapest version is going to go for $80K, but it's still, that one, it's not expected to be released until 2024. So originally it looked pretty good, and now you're looking at the fine details and there's some kind of sketchy stuff going on here. It's not going to be released for so many years. This one, it looks like it's going to be in direct competition with the Cybertruck. So even this $80K model here, the Cybertruck is supposed to retail for $40 to $70K. So the Cybertruck is supposed to be cheaper. And then if you look at the range on the General Motors model Hummer, it's going to be 250 miles. That's like the weaker version Model 3. I mean, the Cybertruck was supposed to have 500 miles of range. So that's pretty significant there. And it's not just GM. We have the Hummer coming out, we have the Cybertruck coming out, but then we also have a few other ones. We have the Rivian, we have the Ford Raptor. There's a bunch of these electric pickup trucks coming out now, and you're actually seeing some differentiation in the market of kind of what they're trying to do, what markets they're trying to hit. But it's becoming a big thing, again, with these electric vehicles. And the other big news on this is that they sold out in the first week for all of the higher end edition, that $112,000 vehicle, all sold out in 1 week. So the whole next year's production is already gone.